Hello, 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 and welcome back, Cosmic Baddies, to another episode of Chakras and Cuss Words podcast. My name is Catherine, and I am your host. Today, we are getting into the astrology of December of 2025, and I'm going to do a very quick reflection of November. November, we definitely had some big movement, okay? We were leaving Scorpio season and transitioning over to Sagittarius season. For those who are interested in what day I'm actually recording, I am recording on Sunday the 23rd around 8:29. So I will say that November was an interesting month. I felt like some of the movement, I don't know if it's retrogrades, we have 5 planets of retrogrades, if it was the full moon in Taurus or Uranus going retrograde in Taurus, but there was definitely a lot of complicated topics. There was tons of topics that I really could talk about, but I picked just a few to look at. So one of the things that I want to talk about, because I thought it was absolutely like breathtaking, was the movie Frankenstein. Now, I will say I did not see it in movie theaters. I would say the last movie that I've actually gone to the movie theaters and seen was Sinners. I'm debating if I'm going to get out and go see Dracula in the movie theater. I'm going to be honest, I love the goth horror, spooky, not necessarily horror, but the goth romance. That's my thing. I love everything spooky. Frankenstein was right up there with the element of the visuals, the storyline, just how it captivated the audience with the love story. That's really like my vibe. Not necessarily my hubby's vibe. We have a different taste. Like, he's definitely a different type of movie watcher. He likes the comic movies, like the funny movies, like the Fridays and the 21 Jump Streets. I like more of like the indulgent, mind-twisting, dramatic cinemas with the visual penetration, if you know what I mean. I love everything romantic and gothic. So Frankenstein was a film in 2025 and is really like a goth science fiction film that was produced by Guillermo del Toro, and it was based by the 1818 novel of Mary Shelley. And this film was absolutely breathtaking. He said it was his dream project, and I could definitely see why. The visuals on there were just amazing. Like, personally, I would say this is probably one of my favorite films that I've watched in 2025. It was absolutely beautifully crafted. And one of the things that I loved was the outfits of Elizabeth and the storyline of heartbreak, love, and just kind of being alienated and also having like abandonment issues, which a lot of us definitely in this modern time do have. I would say one of the most poetically beautiful transitions of life was when the mother died. And for those who haven't seen it, like, what do you call this? I'm spilling some tea of the movie. Her burial casket was absolutely gorgeous. And the first thing I thought was like, oh my God, I want to be buried in a casket like that. It was so romantically well done. And then I found out that these burial cases are actually real. They're called fixed patent metallic burial cases, and they were known back in this time to basically create it where people could view the body in some elements of like a beautiful capsule that looked like, it almost looks like a tomb, like it almost looks like a mummy tomb. Like, it's just very interesting. And I'm going to share some of the visuals on the podcast on the YouTube channel and Spotify. But it was interesting because they made it like this to protect from grave robbers. So it was like the person was in almost like a cocoon. It's just very visually pleasing. And I'm like, I want one. I want one. So, we will see, right? We will see. So I thought that was very interesting. And I noticed that this movie, a lot of talk about it was right around when Mercury entered retrograde. And also it was happening in retrograde in Sagittarius, which had like everybody really thinking about this masterpiece that was created. And then also we saw Jupiter retrograde in Cancer. Now, one of the storylines that came out was this young lady on TikTok. She was calling a lot of the churches, and she was calling the churches and she was implying that she needed help. And she was also implying that she wanted the churches to like give her money, and she was calling like all kinds of churches. And during this time of Jupiter retrograde in Cancer, a Louisiana pastor calls this TikToker a demon after she basically exposed his church for not donating food to a starving baby in a viral social media experiment. He said that she had a spirit of a witch. Now, there's definitely some talk about this because I've heard a few things. So I've heard that the TikToker, rightfully so, was exposing the churches. But then also, I heard that she was also only calling, I guess you could say, only calling like Black churches, which I have a huge problem with because I feel like if you are going to do a social media experiment, you should definitely call both churches of all walks of land, right? You should call the white churches, the Christian churches. You should call every church or every temple. You should call everybody equally. Just don't call out certain churches. And I don't know, that kind of made me feel like they're scamming, they're scamming on both sides, because if you're going to do a social media experiment, I don't know how true this is because I didn't research it that much. Definitely make it viable on both perspectives. Also, what did kind of seem interesting is like, okay, yes, we have scammers in the church. Yes, we also have scammers in the spiritual streets too. Now, do I think this lady has a spirit of a witch? Nah. I mean, the term witch is like used so loosely, right? To me, it just makes it seem like there's definitely a division where people see that like spiritual practices, if you don't agree with their spiritual practice, you're automatically going to portray them as something evil. Now, should churches be donating to somebody? Yeah, sure. Or, having resources for people who truly need help in a time of need, not just when they want to do their donations. I think so. I think they should have like a separate pot of donation funds, because a lot of churches are are nonprofit, and they are also seen as a church doesn't have to pay taxes. So I definitely think that churches should have like this pot where they're able to donate and help people kind of get their feet back on the ground. But I did think that this story was definitely interesting because it did show like almost like two sides of the situation. And then also around this time, we had the Epstein email list come out around Mercury in Sagittarius conjuncts Mars in Sagittarius. And in this email, they had all kinds of just speculation that Trump and Bill Clinton were doing some extracurricular activities, and possibly that Trump was giving Bill some fellatio. And it brought back the Monica Lewinsky theme, which was interesting to me because I think Monica Lewinsky's story kind of broke around the time of the Saturn in Aries. And I did look up a little bit of Bill Clinton's chart, and that's all around the energy of his seventh house. Even though at the time that this story broke, Saturn was actually in retrograde in Pisces, but it just seems interesting that, this action started off in his seventh house and then transitioned over with the retrograde. Definitely interesting. Also, the U.S. Treasury has decided that they're no longer going to keep the penny. The penny's not worth production. I mean, it kind of makes sense. Who, uses pennies still? But they're just saying that it costs more money to make a penny than it does for how much the penny is actually worth. So I thought that was a very interesting story. And I will say that is all the stories that I've been keeping up with. Unfortunately, I have not been doing well on listening to the news or media. But let's talk about the astrology for December. So December's astrology is really like infused with a mystic forecast. It definitely feels that energy of winter kind of transitioning over. So we have Venus in Sagittarius sextiles Pluto in Aquarius, and that is occurring on December 2nd. And this is kind of like the opening to the month. And I feel like this energy is just like shooting an electric fire of unconventional love, and connections may deepen and create an area of intensity. And it's also very like adventurous, and it does have like a honest transformation, and it does feel very settled in the area of communication and also higher philosophy and breaking certain trends, as it is with Venus in Sagittarius and sextiles Pluto in Aquarius. So I do feel like connections that are made during this time can feel very untraditional, and also feel like, am I creating a connection with somebody that I totally would not usually? But there is like a lure that it drives you to that movement. And I think it's going to be a transformative and also reflective period for the collective, especially in areas of relationship. Also on December 4th, we have the full moon in Gemini. And this is when the twins, or the energy of the twins, the duality, really lights up the sky. And it feels quick, it feels vibracious. This is definitely like an area that urges you to tie up loose ends, reconnect with people, and honor your own situations and your duality. I love like this post that's been going around Instagram, and it's like basically there's two versions of me, or there's two wolves that live within me, and they're both different, but they're also somewhat similar. And I think people need to reconnect with honoring that we are very much centered off of slipping into chapters, transitioning, evolving in that chapter, growing to that chapter, and then closing that chapter and moving into another version or area of duality of ourselves. Like we're forever evolving. We're not staying put in one energy. And I feel like this full moon in Gemini kind of highlights that. Also, we have Mercury in Scorpio, trines Jupiter in Cancer. So Mercury is definitely going through the area of movement that feels trined in creation with Jupiter, and also having like a protective layer around the energy of the feminine. This cosmic chaos, as some would say, with a trine in the areas of creation and movement, is asking us to reset in movements of the feminine, and also retreat in areas of conversation, and recalibrate in the movement of us, in the movement of creation. So we definitely see this is occurring in two water constellations. We have Mercury in Scorpio trining Jupiter in Cancer, and it's centered around the area of the sacral chakra, the area of creation and passion, and also the area of confidence. So allowing us to use the area of speaking and also the movement of creation and making it outward in our feminine duality and also our feminine nature, as it is coming right around December 6th after the full moon in Gemini. Also, we have Mercury in Scorpio trine Saturn in Pisces. Scorpio and Pisces, definitely another deep connection of movement with the water signs, and also with the fixed and the mutable signs. So you definitely see a lot of action with the fixed and the mutable signs in the energy of December. And this is like trusting your inner compass, trusting your intuition, and also trusting that upper crown chakra around the energy of the throat, the energy of the mind. As Mercury in Scorpio trine Saturn in Pisces, some of us can be also a little bit too worthy and too reflective on our own individuality and our own intuition that sometimes we overlook others. Then right around December 8th, we have Mars in Sagittarius squares Saturn in Pisces. And I would definitely think that this is almost like a slow modality of energy, and it could almost feel a little bit too conservative, and it could almost feel like a little bit too structured. And some of us might be feeling like our feet are tied in certain situations, and some of us might be feeling like the action of Mars in Sagittarius almost is stopping us in our area of peace. And it could be a little bit of like cosmic chaos. Also, we have a Neptune goes direct in Pisces, and it feels good to have a planet going direct, right? And this is really seeing where we can continue to create and allowing us to look into our intuition and our spiritual imagination and wake up from some of our illusions and our visions that have been leaving us foggy, right? Or have been leading us to an area that feels a little bit delusional. Also, December 10th is kind of a high energy day as we have Mercury opposite Uranus. So the energy of Mercury opposite Uranus in Taurus is like there is an area of opposition, and there's definitely an area of movement that could feel hostile, and it could also feel a little bit too, too, I guess you could say, rigid. And it makes it feel like communication definitely will have some heavy topics. So I feel like something big might happen around December 10th. Also on December 11th, we have Mercury enters Sagittarius. As Mercury leaps into the energy of Sagittarius, I feel like there's definitely going to be a lot of vocal points. And there's also going to be a lot of area around maybe the throat chakra and philosophy. One of the things that really stood out with November was they said that nursing and a lot of other professional medical careers were not considered professional anymore. And I think that's interesting because a lot of us have devoted a lot of time, and many of us do try to be as professional as possible. But there is a realistic nature that comes with professionalism. And I think sometimes in nursing, because nursing is around the feminine process, that they are trying to take away that professionalism. They can't take it away from physicians. They can't take it away from, the dentist or what. But I feel like since nursing is so related to the feminine and has such a strong legacy of being a feminine career, that we see that it's almost like they're messing with the feminine state. And that's just my philosophy, because they want to bring the women, I don't know, do they want to bring the women back to the house? I mean, back to the home life? I mean, we can't afford this shit. So it's very interesting. But we definitely see with Mercury enter Sagittarius that the sky is kind of clear. There's no more like true area of retrogrades, because Mercury has already gone direct on November, I believe, 29th. So there's definitely some movement for travel. I hope by now the energy of aviation has picked back up and maybe they're not canceling as many flights, but there's definitely been some challenging times with the government shutdown. So I do feel like people will start to kind of like pick up the speed. The areas of movement will kind of continue to move forward. Maybe they'll say, you know what, that was a bad move of the Department of Education to try to remove the professionalism or the title of professional from the nursing practice and also physical therapy. Like, what the fuck? Like, I'm just like, oh, blown away. And what's interesting is I didn't realize that the lady who heads the Department of Education was like, what's that guy's name? UFCW, like McMahon? I don't know, fucking wrestler dude. Okay, it's too early for me to get into this. Also, Mercury sextiles Pluto around December 13th. And Mercury will be in Sagittarius and Pluto will be in Aquarius. So we definitely feel that karmic kiss, that area of nudges, and also the synchronicity of evolution and transformation as it continues to occur. We have Mars squares Neptune, and then Mars enters Capricorn. So as Mars climbs into the energy of Capricorn, we could definitely feel the movement of plans, the energy of deciding factors, and the energy of goal setting, building our future. Then on December 16th, we have the sun squares Saturn as the sun is transitioning still in Sagittarius and Saturn is in Pisces, challenging our angles and visions, and also seen as a movement that will allow us to create intentions for protecting ourselves from those energetic vampires and who are trying to steal our cosmic awareness. Then we have a new moon in Sagittarius, which is all around creating intentions centered around adventure and curiosity and creating seeds that stretch beyond our comfort zone. We also have the area of Sun squares Neptune and Venus squares Saturn, right around the ending of the new moon on December 19th and December 20th. Then it is time for us to switch over to winter. Now, winter's going to be challenging for some people. Winter's always challenging. It's cold. It's reckless. It's our survival state. Some of us like to hibernate. Some of us like to just stay away from other people. And some of us still gather and meet up. The sun is in Capricorn and winter solstice is here. The sun reaches the goat's ancient mountains, as some would say, for the longest night of the year as winter solstice lands in a portal of grounding, reflection, and mapping out what you want for 2026. Now, I will say, I definitely think that for the year, as we are entering 2026, we should be reflective of our goals and our interpersonal means of movement. Not many of us will have that deep desire to go create a whole bunch of goals, right? Especially as it is the dead of winter in the northern hemisphere and everything's fucking cold. But some of us can definitely be reflective and see how we can start to create the stepping stones of what it is that we will feel aligned with as spring hits and the new astrological calendar moves forward. Also, we have Venus enters Capricorn, and that is occurring on December 24th. And we have the energy of Christmas, the energy of a lot of festivities, and the energy of being around family, shifting from love and money into a practical long-term territory. Now, for those who know, I believe Jesus was a Pisces. I think it's interesting that we celebrate Christmas around Capricorn season, and all Christmas is about is capitalism. So, very interesting. Also, Juno enters a Capricorn, and we see that area climbs to commitments, contracts, and futures, building and creating center stage in our outlook. Also, during this time, we have Mercury squares Sagittarius, where Sagittarius and that energy of Pisces really makes a little bit of a confusing year coming to a halt. Now, I will definitely say that we should speak slower, we should listen clearer, and we should not assume that people are having the greatest intentions in our overall well-being. And we should understand that we have to be protective of ourselves and our own energy for the most part. I think December is going to be one hell of a month. I also think there's going to be a lot of interesting topics that come out during December. I feel like it's going to be interesting to see how this Mercury and Saturn plays out. It is a rhythm that we felt before, but it feels a little bit twisted. And I think that people are just kind of like over it. And a lot of people are talking about boycotting Christmas, which I kind of get. You know, we had the government shut down. So many people have lost their jobs. And people have asked me, like, how do you boycott Christmas? Well, you don't necessarily boycott Christmas. Like, what Christmas means to you or what these holidays mean to you is up to you. But boycotting the overspending and the capitalistic, I guess you could say, nature that comes with these holidays. Mariah Carey was under fire for her Sephora ad where her and the elf were like getting ready for Christmas, and then Mariah Carey sees that the elf is like stealing all her makeup or her goodies. And she's like, what are you doing? And he's like, we're boycotting Christmas. And she's like, you can't boycott Christmas, And he's like, people are tired. We're overworked. And a lot of people felt like, Mariah Carey and Sephora kind of laughed in the collective's face and were making fun of how much people are actually struggling. And I will say this, Mariah Carey, for the most part, she came from a very humble background. And while she's became this diva, she's all known about being a diva, right? But that's her. That's who she is. She's also an Aries. And she's going to live in her own identity. But Mariah Carey actually does a lot for the community. I feel like Mariah Carey did not necessarily see the backlash that was going to occur. She probably thought like it was cute and it was funny. And she was also contemplating and probably talking about how this can change focus and how a lot of people are suffering and a lot of people are having hardship. But I think she also meant to like make it like a joke and it kind of backfired. So you could see sometimes those fire signs that kind of happens. But I thought that was very interesting. Just the outrage that people are like, yeah, no, we're not celebrating Christmas. We're not going to go out and buy a bunch of crap we don't need for what. And I will say it's kind of true. A lot of times I go out and I buy shit and I don't even think my kids fucking like it. So, I'm going to try to do a more practical Christmas this year and not just spend a bunch of money and save it because we got some big bills coming up this year, but it is what it is in 2026. So I want to thank everybody for listening to this podcast. Please like, comment, and share with your witchy bestie. Let me know how you think December is going to play out in the area of the cosmos, and have a great day. Bye.